If you're considering making a move to Northern Virginia, but you haven't decided which area yet, then this video is for you. Now, there are plenty of great neighborhoods in Northern Virginia. In this video, we're going to be comparing Arlington, McLean, Vienna, and Falls Church. And they all have a ton of great things to offer. However, there are some big differences between each area, each neighborhood that you definitely need to know before choosing the right place for you and your family. So when it comes to housing affordability, each of these areas is going to be pretty expensive. These are some of the top destinations in Northern Virginia. However, some of these neighborhoods you can definitely find, more affordable places, even condos and townhouses before moving up to a single family house. But that being said, McLean is definitely going to be the most expensive and most exclusive type of neighborhood. I think there's even a $40 million house for sale right now in McLean. And then after that, you're going to have Vienna and Arlington are going to be roughly similar in prices. And then Falls Church is definitely going to be the most affordable. However, there are neighborhoods in Falls Church like Lake Barcroft, or if you're right in downtown Falls Church, that are going to be just as expensive as some of these other neighborhoods. Now, as far as prices go in Arlington, you're going to have much more of a range of prices. Like I think you can still buy a $200,000 condo in Arlington. And there's smaller houses, there's older neighborhoods, like more up and coming neighborhoods. And then you have more of the exclusive, like North Arlington, super expensive neighborhoods. So you're going to have a wide range of different types and styles of neighborhoods, different types of housing stock, just much more variety. Whereas when you're in Vienna, the price ranges are not going to vary drastically. Like Vienna is much more residential, so all the neighborhoods are much more similar than like in Arlington. And then Falls Church is going to be the most affordable. You have a lot of tear down houses in Falls Church. You'll see the brand new construction, and then you'll see a lot of like smaller houses built around the 1950s that are kind of being knocked down for the bigger, more modern houses, sometimes the craftsman houses. So depending on what part of Falls Church, the development may have not come to that neighborhood yet. You'll see maybe like one or two new construction homes, but you won't see quite the development yet that you have in parts of like Arlington. Now we'll cover the different types of homes for each area. So in Arlington, you're gonna have the biggest variety, like I mentioned, the biggest variety of prices, also the biggest variety of styles of homes and types of homes. So you have everything from like garden style condos up to, penthouse condos, you have townhouses, small single family houses, big single family houses. You probably have more variety of housing stock than anywhere I know of, because Arlington is much more of that residential urban mix. So, once you get closer to like the Orange Line areas, it's gonna be a little bit more dense. And then of course, once you get closer to DC, when you're in like Roslyn, you have like, obviously it's really dense. You see skyscrapers, and some people think Roslyn is actually DC, and that's where you get more of like the penthouse condos and that kind of thing. And another thing to know about the houses in Arlington, it always depends on the neighborhood and house and whatnot, but generally speaking, you're not going to get a huge lot. Now, the park system in Arlington is great. I think 99% of residents are within a 10-minute walk of a park. But if you want that half-acre, like private lot, Arlington's probably not for you. And a lot of the houses in Arlington are older, so they might need some updating. But overall, if you want more convenience and maybe you don't need a 5,000 or 6,000 square foot house and you're okay with maybe an older house or renovated house, then Arlington is great. As far as the housing stock in McLean goes, it's going to be mostly larger single family houses, bigger lots, more privacy, more exclusivity. And as far as like custom, like new construction homes, it's probably one of the biggest markets, maybe even in the United States, for these, ultra luxury custom houses. And then as you get closer to Tyson's Corner, where obviously there's more development, you get some more townhouses and luxury condos and apartments and that kind of thing. So if you want more space and privacy, but still being relatively close to everything, and you can pay a premium, then McLean is definitely a good option. So the housing stock in Falls Church is going to kind of be similar to Arlington in the sense that there's going to be so many different types of neighborhoods, some that have already been completely redeveloped, some that are still, you're seeing a lot of tear down houses because the homes they built there were so small. But Falls Church is going to have a lot of single family houses. You're also going to have some townhouses and more affordable condos. So it's going to be more of that variety. And like I mentioned, depending on what part of Falls Church you're in, it's going to be much more affordable. So you can buy a brand new construction house in Falls Church for, like 1.7. Whereas if that house was in McLean, you're probably looking at about 2.5 or, around there. As far as the housing stock in Vienna, it's going to be mostly single family houses. You're going to have some townhouses and some condos, but generally speaking, the people that move to Vienna, are wanting that bigger house, the bigger lot, the pleasant community with the white picket fence. And in Vienna, you also have a lot of modern houses being built. So you'll drive through a neighborhood, you'll see like more of the traditional like 1950s, 1960s houses. You'll see some houses that were built within the last 10 years. And then you'll see some ultra modern, like brand new, you're not even sure what style house it is, but you'll see those throughout Vienna. So it's not like it's just one street that has them. Like Vienna's starting to have a lot of new modern new construction homes. Hey, real quick, 10 seconds, it's Jeff here. So if you have any questions about any of these areas or would like to set up a showing for any of these homes in any of these neighborhoods, give us a call, text, email, whatever you prefer. My team and I were in these neighborhoods all the time and would love to assist you. Okay, let's talk about the vibe of these areas because they definitely each have like their own kind of like personality. So Arlington is going to be much more like a hybrid of residential and urban living. You have the Orange Line corridor that like runs like right through Arlington. So obviously there's a lot of development around there. And then a lot of residential neighborhoods that are like just, walking distance to the metro, to the development, to Ballston, to Clarendon, to Roslyn, that kind of thing. And you can still have those like very quiet, very residential neighborhoods that are more like McLean. Like when you get up to further parts of like North Arlington or even parts of South Arlington, it can feel like very like you're far away from everything, even though you might just be a 10-minute drive, to Ballston or Roslyn or Clarendon. And one of my friends, she grew up in McLean. And I kind of showed her like roughly where I lived in Arlington. And she's like, wow, it's so urban. It's almost like a city. And the neighborhood I grew up in, Lyon Park, it's very residential, very walkable, very close to everything. But then just outside of Lyon Park, you just have all this development. So it was kind of like, to me, honestly, it was like living in the best of both worlds because you have the quiet residential streets, and then you can walk 10 blocks or 5-10 blocks and you're at the metro. But her coming from McLean, she wasn't used to like seeing like maybe condos, apartment buildings, stores like right there. McLean is much more residential, suburban, quiet, like private kind of living. And with all the different metro stations that you have in Arlington, of course, it attracts a lot of young professionals. You have all these luxury buildings that have gone up over the last 20 years and are still going up, with Amazon HQ2 and just different other companies moving their headquarters here. It's a great place for that. Let's talk about the McLean vibe. So McLean is going to have, larger houses, larger lots, much more exclusive, much more private, and much quieter. And the streets and neighborhoods in McLean are very scenic as well. I remember, growing up in Arlington, anytime we were in like McLean or Great Falls, we would like roll the windows down and like the air just seemed so fresh and clean, and it was green and scenic all around. Like there was no big buildings or anything like that. So it can be a very scenic place as well. And I mentioned the vibe in McLean being very upscale, prestigious. So if you drive around McLean or go grab a coffee and park your car in the parking lot, you're gonna see all Teslas, Mercedes, high-end vehicles no matter where you go. Let's talk about the Vienna vibe. So Vienna's gonna have that very traditional, like picture perfect, like pleasant neighborhood in the suburbs kind of thing. Like I mentioned, the white picket fence, the neighbors walking their dogs, everyone's like waving to each other. It's that kind of vibe. So it's a very pleasant place. It's like the classic residential suburb. You got good schools, community events, and they have the main strip there with different restaurants and shops. But for the most part, you're going to be driving around. Now, the Falls Church vibe can vary because there's so many different neighborhoods in Falls Church. Most people kind of think of Falls Church as like, the small town vibe. When you're right there, like right off the main strip, you have the State Theater, which is super cool. You can see bands from the 90s. I mean, they have all different types of really cool bands and different events going on there. And you have the Whole Foods there now as well. And then you also have a lot of up and coming neighborhoods in areas like further away from the main strip in Falls Church. So it's kind of all over the place. You kind of have to get a feel for Falls Church, drive around, check out a few different neighborhoods to kind of see which one is best for you. So as far as lifestyle and amenities goes, we'll talk about Arlington first. So Arlington is definitely going to have like the most amount of restaurants. I think there's like several hundred restaurants in Arlington. You're going to have the most amount of parks. You have nightlife options, tons of gyms and recreational activities. And then of course, Arlington is right next to DC, so you can get into DC very easily, depending on what you want to do. Go to the theater, watch a show, go to a parade. I don't know. There's lots of different options. Basically, Arlington is going to be the most active and most social. And then also, as far as the school ratings go, I can't really comment too much on the schools, but Arlington does have some very highly rated schools. You should always do your own research as far as that goes. Now with McLean, you're going to have much more of that quieter residential feel, kind of like the country club vibe, but there still are a lot of great community events in McLean. And then, as far as dining, shopping, and everything like that goes, you have Tyson's Corner right there, which is right now doing like a $100 million redevelopment, even though it doesn't probably even need it, because Tyson's Corner is already one of the nicest places out there. There's also plenty of trails. Like I mentioned, it's very green. There's a trail you can get down to the Potomac River. And of course, one of the biggest selling points with McLean is the school district. So it's one of the highest rated school districts in the entire area. Now, the amenities and lifestyle with Falls Church, again, it's gonna have that small town feel, community events. You got the farmer's market. Like I mentioned in another video, if you want your resale value to be really good, buy in a place that has a farmer's market. And if your neighborhood doesn't have a farmer's market, then you should start one. your property values will probably go up. But Falls Church is going to kind of have that Arlington vibe, a mixture of residential and urban, with Falls Church being, a little bit more residential unless you're like right there on the main strip. And of course, the Falls Church schools are highly rated, but again, that's something you need to decide for yourself. Next up, we have Vienna. So Vienna definitely has like that community feel. There's always like different parades and events going on within the neighborhood. And a lot of people, what they do is they might like start in Arlington, and then if they want to expand their family or whatever it might be, get a little more space, get a little more peace and quiet, then they might move out to Vienna. And of course, Vienna also has highly rated schools, but of course you should always verify that for yourself. As far as commuting goes, we'll talk about Arlington first. So Arlington is gonna have the most amount of options available for commuting, and also it's gonna be the closest, to DC if you need to commute there. So you got bus, Metro walk, as we say, BMW, bus, Metro walk. And a lot of people just drive, but you basically have a ton of different options as far as how you're gonna commute. And then, your commute typically is not gonna be very far because DC is right there. There's plenty of people in Arlington that just bike to work. And in most areas, you're not gonna be able to do that because the trail might be an hour long, or there might not even be a trail. And in Arlington, there's tons of just different modes of transportation, different trails, different options available. As far as commuting and walkability in McLean, it's much more residential. So most people are going to drive to work. It's not too far. You're about 10 miles outside of DC. So, it's not going to be a 5 or 10 minute drive, but it's definitely a doable commute that plenty of people do. And then of course you also have the Tyson's Corner Metro right there. So it's a quick drive to the Metro, and you can take it into the city from there. Now, Vienna is definitely car oriented. Like if you live in Arlington, you don't necessarily need a car, but if you live in Vienna, you 100% need a car. There is a Metro stop in Vienna that a lot of people use, but for the most part, you're going to have a car, maybe a few cars living in Vienna. I used to work in Tyson's Corner, right next to Vienna. And, if you're driving home in rush hour, it can take like 45 minutes to get from like Tyson's Corner to Arlington. If you're doing it without rush hour, it might be like a 25 minute drive, like from Arlington to Vienna. So it's just something to keep in mind. Vienna is super nice once you're there, but it can be a little bit of a drive to get out there. And while there is a Metro there, a lot of people depend on their car. As far as commuting in Falls Church, you have several options. So a lot of people, you might just drive into the city. There are 2 Metro stops in Falls Church. So some people will drive, to the Metro stop and then go from there. And there's also plenty of buses that will take you to the Metro. I just had a client purchase in Falls Church, and he wanted to be like pretty close to the Metro within 10 minutes. So what he was going to do is just drive 10 minutes to the East Falls Church Metro. We found a great neighborhood kind of over by the Seven Corners area, quiet neighborhood where there's still a lot of development and still like some good value there. And so his plan was just to drive, 10 minutes to the Metro. There was also an option for him to take the bus. There was a bus that connected, just a few blocks away that he could take directly to the Metro. So it's a pretty easy commute. This was a pretty broad overview, but I hope this helps you narrow down which area would be best for you. Each neighborhood and location has pros and cons. It's more about, what's important to you. So Arlington is great if you want to be closer, have more walkability, more of that urban lifestyle. McLean is great if you want more privacy, more luxury, top rated schools. Vienna is great if you want a bigger house, more space, like that classic, pleasant suburban neighborhood, and you don't mind being a little bit outside of the city. And then Falls Church is great if you want easy access to everything and a little bit more affordability and having a small town feel, depending on which neighborhood you're in. So let me know which area you would prefer, and you can call us, you can text us, you can email us anytime. My team and I were in these neighborhoods all the time and would love to assist you.